The room smelled of antiseptic and despair. Tamika clutched her daughter's limp hand, her knuckles white with fear. Maya's tiny chest barely rose and fell, her breaths faint, her skin an ashen gray. The sound of monitors beeping filled the silence, each tone like a countdown she couldn't ignore. A nurse approached, eyes heavy with exhaustion and sympathy, but her words carried no comfort. "We're doing everything we can," she said softly, though her voice betrayed the futility of their efforts. Tamika's tears blurred her vision, but her resolve was sharp. "What do you mean everything? She needs surgery now." The nurse hesitated, glancing toward a cluster of doctors who whispered among themselves. They avoided her gaze, their postures tense, as if looking her way would break their fragile composure. Finally, one stepped forward, his face grave. "Ms. Hayes, the surgery is very specialized. It requires resources we simply don't have here." Tamika stood, her voice trembling but firm. "So transfer her. Do whatever it takes." The doctor's expression didn't change. "Without insurance or state aid, we can't proceed." "I'm so sorry." The words hit her like a blow, knocking the air from her lungs. Her daughter's life had a price tag, and she couldn't afford it. Tamika worked 2 jobs, cleaning office buildings at dawn and waiting tables at night. Yet, here she was, told her child's survival depended on money she didn't have. It wasn't fair. Her voice cracked as she pleaded. "She's just a little girl. Please, there has to be something." But the doctor only shook his head and walked away. Tamika collapsed into the chair beside Maya's bed, her mind racing. Maya had always been full of life, a bright, curious child who loved singing and drawing rainbows. Now, she looked so small, so fragile, as though the world had stolen her vibrancy. The systemic barriers that had quietly eroded Tamika's life were now trying to take her daughter too. She pulled out her phone, hands trembling, and opened the camera app. Her face appeared on the screen, tear-streaked and desperate. She pressed record. "My name is Tamika Hayes, and I'm begging for help. My daughter Maya is dying." Her voice cracked, but she kept going. "She has a rare heart condition, and she needs surgery immediately. The hospital says they can't help us because we can't pay." She paused, glancing at Maya, who lay motionless beside her. "She's only 7 years old. Please, if you see this, share it. Help us save her life." She ended the recording and stared at the screen. Would anyone care? Would anyone even watch? She uploaded the video to social media with trembling fingers, adding hashtags like #SaveMaya and #JusticeForMaya. She knew the odds were slim, but she had no other choice. Hours passed, and the video gained little attention. A few kind strangers left words of encouragement, but others were cruel. "If you can't afford kids, don't have them," one comment read. Another said, "Where's her father?" "Oh, that's right." Tamika deleted the app, unable to stomach the hate, but the seed of doubt lingered. Maybe they were right. Maybe she had failed her daughter. The room grew darker as night fell, but Tamika's resolve grew brighter. She didn't care how long it took or how many times she had to beg. Someone out there had to listen. Someone had to care. She pressed her lips to Maya's forehead, whispering a promise. "I'll save you, baby. I swear." The sunlight filtered through the thin hospital curtains as Tamika stirred awake. Her phone vibrated on the chair beside her, buzzing incessantly like a swarm of bees. She blinked, disoriented, before grabbing it. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw the notifications flooding her screen. Overnight, her video had gone viral. It was everywhere. Hundreds of thousands of shares, likes, and comments. Major influencers had reposted it, their captions amplifying her plea. News outlets began picking up the story, broadcasting her raw desperation and Maya's fragile state. Tamika couldn't believe it. For the first time in days, hope flickered in her chest. She scrolled through the comments, her emotions swinging like a pendulum. Messages of support poured in. "Praying for Maya," one read. Another said, "I've donated. Stay strong." But mixed among the kindness was cruelty. Trolls questioned her parenting, her motives, even her honesty. "This is probably a scam," someone wrote. "If she wanted help, she should have worked harder," said another. The words cut deep, reopening wounds she tried to bury. Tamika fought back tears, reminding herself of her mission. This wasn't about her pride. It was about saving Maya. The notifications didn't stop. Her crowdfunding page, initially stagnant, began to climb. $5 here, $10 there. But as the donations trickled in, the harsh reality loomed. The goal was $200,000, an impossible number for most people, let alone someone like her. She thought about her life, every moment that had brought her to this point. Working 2 jobs had never been enough to escape poverty, let alone prepare for a medical crisis. The system had failed her, just as it failed so many others like her. Black families, she knew, faced more obstacles in crowdfunding than white families. Studies had proven it. The biases weren't just personal, they were structural. Healthcare systems often prioritized those with money and privilege, leaving families like hers to fend for themselves. She stared at Maya, her small body hooked up to machines, and clenched her fists. Her daughter deserved better. Her thoughts were interrupted by a notification that made her heart race. A prominent activist had retweeted her video. Their caption read, "We cannot let Maya become another statistic. This is what systemic racism looks like." Within minutes, the activist's followers began flooding her page with messages of solidarity. Donations spiked. Her story was becoming a symbol, not just of a desperate mother, but of a larger, broken system. Then came the tweet that stopped everything. Elon Musk. The name popped up on her screen like a beacon. She read it 3 times, her mind struggling to process the words. "Let's fix this," it said. Just 3 words, but they carried the weight of the world. Her hands trembled as she showed the tweet to a nurse. "Do you think he means it?" Tamika asked, her voice shaking. The nurse's eyes widened. If it's Elon Musk, anything's possible. Speculation exploded online. Was he serious? Would he actually help? Or was this another empty gesture? Another billionaire playing savior without follow-through? Comment threads buzzed with theories. Probably a PR stunt. One user wrote, "He could fix this with pocket change," said another. The media picked up the story within hours, turning it into a frenzy. Cameras showed up at the hospital, journalists demanding interviews. Tamika, overwhelmed, agreed to speak. Her voice cracked as she said, "I don't care about the attention. I just want my daughter to live." She didn't know what to believe. For every encouraging tweet or comment, there was doubt. The hospital administrators, who had initially ignored her, now hovered anxiously. If Musk followed through, they'd be under scrutiny too. Tamika sat by Maya's bedside, gripping her phone as though it were a lifeline. Maya stirred faintly, her eyelids fluttering, and Tamika leaned in close. "Hold on, baby," she whispered. "Mommy's going to make this right." The minutes stretched into hours, the hours into a day. Every ping from her phone felt like a knife edge, hope and fear entwined. She checked Musk's account obsessively, but no new tweets appeared. Had he forgotten? Had he even been serious? Tamika's mind spiraled with questions she couldn't answer. Outside, the world buzzed with opinions, theories, and debates. Inside, her world was still and fragile, balanced precariously on the edge of despair. Her phone vibrated again, this time with an email notification. She opened it hesitantly, her heart pounding. The sender's name made her gasp. It was from Tesla's corporate office. Tamika stared at her phone, the email still open. Her hands trembled as she read the words over and over again. "Dear Ms. Johnson, Elon Musk's team is aware of your situation. We would like to discuss how we can assist." The message included a number to call. Her mind raced with questions. Was this real? Or was it some cruel scam? Her phone buzzed again, startling her. This time, it was a call. The number on the screen wasn't familiar. She hesitated before answering, her voice shaky. "Hello? Ms. Johnson, this is Sarah, Mr. Musk's assistant," the voice on the other end said. Tamika froze. She didn't know what to say. "Mr. Musk has seen your video," Sarah continued. "He wants to help. Can we discuss what's needed?" Tamika's breath hitched. She struggled to process the words. For so long, she had faced only closed doors and empty promises. This felt different, yet too good to be true. "Help? How?" she managed to ask, her voice filled with doubt. We're arranging a $2 million donation to cover Maya's surgery and any future care, Sarah said. We'll also connect you with specialists to ensure Maya gets the best treatment. Tamika's knees buckled, and she sank into a chair. Her voice broke as she said, "Is this real? Why us?" "Because it's the right thing to do," Sarah replied. "We'll send official confirmation shortly." Tamika clutched her phone, tears streaming down her face. But skepticism lingered in her mind. People like her didn't get saved by billionaires. There had to be a catch. Her doubts deepened as the media frenzy escalated. Journalists camped outside the hospital, shouting questions whenever she stepped outside. What did Musk say? Why do you think he chose you? Some even asked if this was a publicity stunt. The constant scrutiny was overwhelming. Tamika struggled to shield Maya from the chaos. Maya's condition was worsening, her small body growing weaker by the day. Tamika focused on staying strong for her daughter. Meanwhile, the online discourse exploded. People debated Musk's motives, dissecting every word of his cryptic tweet. Some hailed him as a hero. Others accused him of using the situation for self-promotion. Tamika avoided social media, exhausted by the noise. The gap between Musk's immense wealth and her own struggles became glaring. He could change their lives with a fraction of his fortune. Yet millions of families like hers remained trapped in a broken system. Why did it take a billionaire's intervention to save one child's life? The irony wasn't lost on her. The healthcare system had failed her, but now Musk's generosity might save Maya. The announcement came late one night. Musk posted on Twitter, "Tamika and Maya's story is heartbreaking. No child should suffer because of money. I'm donating $2 million to cover all costs and more." Tamika's phone buzzed relentlessly as the news spread. Her face was plastered across headlines worldwide. Elon Musk donates $2 million to save little girl's life. Tamika's relief was palpable but cautious. The donation was real, but what would it mean for them long-term? Musk remained elusive. He hadn't spoken directly to Tamika, leaving her with unanswered questions. Why had he chosen her family? Would this attention die down, leaving her to navigate the aftermath alone? Despite her doubts, she couldn't deny the impact of his generosity. The hospital sprang into action, scheduling Maya's surgery for the following week. Doctors who had once dismissed her now spoke to her with urgency and respect. Tamika couldn't shake the bittersweet feeling. Her daughter's life was being saved, but it shouldn't have come to this. Musk's donation sparked broader conversations. Activists called for systemic change, pointing out that no one should rely on billionaires to fill the gaps in healthcare. "We can't let this become the norm," one activist said on national television. "Every child deserves care, not just the ones who catch the attention of the wealthy." Tamika nodded in agreement as she watched the broadcast. She wanted to speak out, but her focus was on Maya. The night before the surgery, Tamika sat by her daughter's bedside. She held Maya's hand, whispering prayers and promises. "I'll always fight for you, baby," she said softly. As she looked at Maya's fragile form, she thought of all the other mothers in her position. Mothers without a viral video or a billionaire's intervention. Her determination grew. This fight wasn't just for Maya. It was for every family failed by a broken system. The next morning, as Maya was wheeled into surgery, Tamika felt a mix of hope and fear. The donation had given them a chance, but the fight for justice was far from over. She vowed to use this moment not just to save her daughter, but to push for a world where stories like theirs wouldn't need a savior. The air was thick with tension as the surgical team prepared the operating room. Tamika stood in the hallway, gripping Maya's favorite stuffed bear. Her heart pounded as she watched the nurses wheel her daughter away. "I love you, baby," she called out, her voice trembling. Maya turned her head weakly and managed a faint smile. "I love you, too, Mama," she whispered. The double doors closed, leaving Tamika alone with her thoughts. The next few hours would decide everything. A nurse approached, explaining that the surgery was more complex than initially thought. The hospital's outdated equipment could slow the process. Tamika's stomach sank. Even with Musk's donation, systemic issues continued to cast a shadow. Word of the challenges reached Musk's team. Within hours, they offered to fund upgrades for the hospital's facilities. But bureaucracy reared its head. Hospital administrators cited protocols and lengthy approval processes. Tamika was livid. Her daughter's life was at stake, and paperwork was delaying progress. Despite the setbacks, Tamika refused to lose hope. Nurses, inspired by the attention on Maya's case, stepped up. They stayed late, double-checked every detail, and ensured the operating room was as prepared as possible. Community members rallied, too. Neighbors dropped off meals, offered rides, and helped cover bills that the donation didn't address. Tamika felt the weight of their support. It was a reminder that while the system was broken, people still cared. As the surgery began, Tamika paced the waiting room. She clutched her phone, refreshing social media. Messages of encouragement poured in from around the world. But the trolls didn't stop either. "Why does her kid get special treatment?" one comment read. Others claimed Musk's intervention was a publicity stunt. Tamika tried to tune it out. None of it mattered if Maya didn't survive. Hours passed with no word from the surgical team. Every minute felt like an eternity. Reporters gathered outside the hospital, cameras flashing every time a staff member exited. Tamika refused to speak. She couldn't focus on anything except the clock ticking above her head. Finally, a surgeon emerged. His face was unreadable. Tamika's breath caught in her throat. The world seemed to stop as she waited for him to speak. He approached slowly, his eyes meeting hers. The room fell silent. For a moment, all she could hear was the pounding of her own heart. The surgeon spoke, his voice calm but serious. "The surgery is ongoing," he said, "but there have been complications. It's going to take longer than we anticipated." Tamika's legs nearly gave out. A nurse rushed to steady her as she fought back tears. "What kind of complications?" she asked, her voice shaking. The surgeon hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Maya's condition is more fragile than we expected," he explained. "But we're doing everything we can." Tamika nodded, trying to stay strong. She had no choice but to wait. Outside the hospital, the world watched. News outlets broadcast live updates, speculating on every detail. Some questioned whether Musk's donation had set a dangerous precedent. Others argued it was a wake-up call for systemic reform. Inside, Tamika sat alone, staring at the operating room doors. She thought of Maya's laughter, her dreams, her tiny hand in hers. She couldn't lose her. Hours dragged on, each one heavier than the last. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the doors opened again. The surgeon emerged, his scrubs stained but his expression softer this time. Tamika stood, her heart in her throat. "Miss Johnson," he began, his voice steady. "Maya made it through the surgery. She's stable." Tamika collapsed into the nearest chair, her body racked with sobs of relief. She didn't hear the rest of his words, only that her baby was alive. The waiting room erupted in applause. Reporters outside scrambled to break the news. Maya's fight wasn't over, but for the first time in weeks, Tamika felt hope. The nurses who had worked tirelessly embraced each other, their exhaustion giving way to joy. Tamika knew there were still battles ahead: recovery, therapy, and the long road to reform. But at that moment, all that mattered was Maya's survival. She whispered a prayer of gratitude, clutching the bear tighter. This was only the beginning. The surgeon's weary smile was the first sign of hope Tamika had seen in days. He stepped forward, his voice calm but carrying the weight of hours spent fighting for Maya's life. "She's stable," he said simply, yet the words echoed like a chorus in Tamika's ears. Her knees buckled, and she fell into the chair behind her. Tears streamed down her face, her sobs filling the room as the nurses gathered close to offer comfort. Outside, the crowd erupted into cheers. News cameras captured the moment, broadcasting Tamika's relief to the world. It wasn't just a victory for Maya. It felt like a victory for everyone who had followed her story. Tamika clutched her phone, scrolling through the flood of messages. Her gratitude was immeasurable, but the exhaustion clung to her like a shadow. Maya's battle wasn't over, but this was a moment to breathe. In the hours after the surgery, Musk's cryptic silence broke. He tweeted a simple message: "We did it. Maya's just the beginning." The words ignited a frenzy of speculation. What did he mean? Was this a promise or just a fleeting statement? Tamika didn't have time to dwell on it. She was escorted to Maya's recovery room, where her daughter lay peacefully under the soft hum of machines. The sight of her alive, though fragile, filled Tamika's heart with a mixture of joy and pain. She whispered, "You're so strong, baby. Mama's here." Maya stirred slightly, her lips curling into a faint smile. The media coverage shifted focus. Maya's story became a lens through which larger systemic issues were examined. Activists used her case as a rallying cry, demanding equity in healthcare for marginalized communities. They highlighted how Maya's journey reflected the struggles of countless others whose stories didn't go viral. Tamika, once a single mother battling in silence, found herself at the center of a growing movement. Journalists lined up for interviews. Politicians released statements. Healthcare advocates pushed for legislative reforms. Still, the darker side of the internet persisted. Critics argued that Musk's intervention was an anomaly, a bandage on a wound that needed surgery. They questioned his motives, accusing him of leveraging Maya's plight for personal gain. But Musk didn't respond to the negativity. Instead, he hinted at something bigger. In an interview, he said, "Maya's story opened my eyes. This isn't about one girl. It's about a system that shouldn't require billionaires to step in." The statement sent ripples through social media and news outlets. Was Musk planning a larger initiative? Tamika, meanwhile, focused on Maya's recovery. The first few days were critical. Doctors closely monitored her heart, watching for signs of rejection or complications. Tamika spent every waking moment by her daughter's side. She read Maya her favorite stories, brought her small gifts, and stayed strong even when fear threatened to take over. Community support didn't waver. Neighbors continued to check in, dropping off meals and cards. Church groups held vigils, praying for Maya's health and for lasting change in the healthcare system. As Maya grew stronger, so did Tamika's resolve. She began to think about her role in the broader fight. Could she turn her personal struggle into a platform for change? She wasn't alone in asking this question. Activists invited her to speak at rallies, share her story in panel discussions, and meet with lawmakers. At first, she was hesitant. What did she know about public speaking or activism? But then she remembered the countless messages she'd received from other mothers. Their words echoed in her mind. "You're our voice." She decided to accept. Her first public appearance was at a healthcare reform rally. Standing on stage, she looked out at the sea of faces, each one expectant and hopeful. Taking a deep breath, she began. "My name is Tamika Johnson, and I'm the mother of a miracle named Maya." Her voice trembled but grew stronger as she shared their journey. The crowd erupted in applause. The momentum was undeniable. Meanwhile, Musk unveiled the beginnings of his larger plan. He announced a foundation aimed at addressing healthcare inequities, pledging millions toward improving access and resources for underprivileged communities. He called it the Maya Initiative. The news sparked hope but also skepticism. Would this be another fleeting act of philanthropy or the start of real change? Tamika watched the announcement with cautious optimism. She didn't fully trust systems of power, but she couldn't deny that Maya's story had created a ripple effect. For now, she focused on what mattered most, her daughter. Maya, once a fragile child clinging to life, began to show signs of recovery. Her laughter returned, tentative but bright. She asked for her favorite meals, played with her toys, and even teased her mom in moments of levity. Each small victory felt monumental. But the scars of the journey lingered. Tamika often found herself lying awake at night, replaying the moments when she thought she might lose Maya. She thought about the systemic failures that had nearly cost her daughter's life, and she resolved never to stop fighting, not just for Maya but for all the families still waiting for their miracle. The world had changed in ways she never expected, but Tamika knew there was still much work to be done. The story wasn't over. Maya ran through the park, her laughter echoing in the crisp air. Her feet hit the ground with the boundless energy of a child who had beaten the odds. It was a stark contrast to the fragile girl lying in a hospital bed just months before. Tamika watched her daughter with a smile, her heart swelling with pride and gratitude. For so long, she had feared the worst. But now, Maya was alive, thriving, and full of life. As they sat on a bench, Tamika couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought them here. The late nights, the endless calls for help, and the overwhelming sense of hopelessness. But there had also been moments of clarity, when the world seemed to rally around Maya, believing in her recovery as much as Tamika did. Maya's story had sparked something larger than just a fight for one life. It had opened a conversation about the deep-seated inequities in healthcare, particularly for marginalized communities. For months, activists, politicians, and healthcare professionals debated the need for systemic reform. Maya's case was a symbol, a powerful reminder of the flaws in a system that too often ignored the most vulnerable. The media coverage had brought a wave of attention to the disparities in healthcare. News outlets highlighted the struggles faced by Black families like Tamika's, who often received less support from crowdfunding platforms and medical systems. Politicians took notice. Some introduced bills to address healthcare access, while others promised to fight for more equitable policies. But for every step forward, there was resistance. Opponents of reform argued that the system didn't need a complete overhaul, just better management. They suggested that the issues weren't about race or class, but about mismanagement and inefficiencies. It became clear that change would not come easily. Despite the progress made, Tamika often found herself frustrated by the slow pace of change. She knew that her daughter's recovery was a miracle, but that didn't mean the fight was over. There were still countless families like hers, struggling to make ends meet while navigating a broken healthcare system. Tamika had learned that the journey didn't end when her daughter survived. It was just beginning. In private moments, she often thought about the help they received and about Elon Musk's involvement. He had been a pivotal figure in their story, and while she was grateful for his intervention, Tamika knew that one man's actions couldn't fix everything. Musk had offered a lifeline when no one else would, but that didn't erase the larger issues that needed to be addressed. She reflected on the broader implications of what had happened. Yes, Maya was alive, but how many other children were still suffering because the system wasn't built to care for them? As much as she appreciated Musk's donation, Tamika knew that true change wouldn't come from individual acts of charity. It would come from policy, from people in power recognizing the inequalities and actively working to fix them. And that was the message she wanted to share. When she spoke at rallies and press conferences, Tamika always emphasized the need for systemic solutions. She didn't want Maya's story to be remembered just for the miracle. She wanted it to be a symbol for the fight ahead. Meanwhile, Musk remained silent for a time. The media buzzed, waiting for him to speak again, to make another announcement. Then, months later, he did. In a live-streamed event, Musk unveiled a new initiative aimed at addressing the systemic inequities in healthcare. The initiative was bold, promising millions in funding for research, policy reform, and healthcare access in underserved communities. He spoke passionately about the need for a new approach to healthcare. "We can't rely on the generosity of a few individuals to fix this," he said. "We need systemic change, and we're going to be part of that change." The announcement was met with mixed reactions. Some hailed it as a turning point, a genuine attempt to make lasting changes. Others were more skeptical, questioning whether Musk's initiative would truly succeed or if it was just another publicity stunt. Tamika watched the announcement with a mix of emotions. She was cautiously optimistic. Musk's words were powerful, but she had learned that actions mattered more than promises. Her journey with Maya had taught her that. Maya was living proof of what was possible when people came together to support each other. But Tamika also knew that the fight was far from over. Musk's initiative, while promising, was just one part of a much larger battle. She wanted to believe that this time, the system would change. But the truth was, she couldn't afford to be naive. The road ahead would be long, and it would take more than just a few high-profile donations to create lasting change. Tamika thought back to the many families she had met along the way. Mothers who had lost their children to the same inequities that almost took Maya. Fathers who had struggled to navigate the complex healthcare system, only to be met with roadblocks and rejection. For all the hope that Maya's story had inspired, the pain of these other families still lingered. Tamika knew that her fight wasn't just for her daughter. It was for every family that had been failed by the system. For every child who deserved the chance to live, but couldn't, because the system wouldn't let them. In the end, Maya's survival had become more than a personal victory. It had become a rallying cry for change. Tamika knew that, no matter what happened next, she couldn't stop fighting. She would keep pushing, keep speaking out, and keep demanding justice for those who had no voice. And so, as Maya ran through the park, carefree and full of life. Tamika found herself renewed in her purpose. The road ahead was uncertain, but with each step forward, Tamika knew she was part of something bigger. A movement that had the potential to change the world, one story at a time. As Maya's laughter echoed in the distance, Tamika could only hope that the world was finally ready to listen.